The rain was not a cleansing shower. It was a brutal, cold assault, mirroring the panic that gripped Isabel Monroe's chest. "Please, don't hurt me. I can't walk," she pleaded, the words escaping in shallow, ragged gasps. Only hours ago, she had been a sovereign entity, the CEO whose gaze alone commanded millions. Now, she was just raw, exposed fear, huddled against the grime of a nameless, narrow alley. The slick pavement mirrored the streetlights, creating shimmering, broken reflections beneath her trembling body. Her white designer suit, a symbol of the unassailable power she had fought for, was ruined, smeared with filth and streaked by tears. Her left ankle, agonizingly swollen, lay twisted beneath her. She knew the pain was bad, but the sheer terror of the footsteps approaching made the physical agony secondary. She had fled her penthouse suite, not from an intruder, but from the man she was supposed to marry, David Langston, her own CFO, who had revealed himself to be a vicious, calculated predator. She clutched the laptop against her chest, the proof of his corporate malfeasance, and her only remaining weapon. The beam of headlights cut through the fog at the alley's mouth, casting the looming figure of David's hired muscle into sharp, monstrous relief against the wet brick walls. The man's steps were slow, deliberate, savoring the chase's inevitable end. Isabel squeezed her eyes shut, ready for the impact, wishing only that the ground would swallow her whole. But just as the shadow fell over her, a sudden, deeper voice sliced through the silence of fear. "Get away from her now!" The command was low, devoid of negotiation, carrying the weight of quiet, absolute authority. The aggressor stopped, startled by the unexpected interruption. Then came the man himself. He was tall, bulky, but moved with a weary grace. He carried a small girl, perhaps 6 years old, Boan Maud, endled tightly in a faded yellow slicker. His own clothes were worn, his boots scuffed, his face etched with exhaustion. But when the attacker turned, he met a pair of eyes that were utterly unyielding. There was no theatrical rage or panic in the stranger's gaze, only a steady, calm certainty that seemed to recognize danger and dismiss it instantly. The little girl stirred in his arms, her voice a tiny thread in the storm. "Daddy, is she going to die?" The man, Isabel's unwitting savior, didn't look away from the threat. He gently lowered the girl to the ground. "Stay right here, Lily," he commanded softly, his focus never leaving the alleyway's darkness. The tension stretched taut, a fragile wire in the downpour. For a beat, the hired man held his ground, assessing the new obstacle. He saw no weapon, just a tired man and a child, yet something in the stranger's composure, perhaps the sheer, bewildering refusal to be intimidated, broke his resolve. He took one step back, then another, and without a word, melted back into the shadows from which he came, leaving only the sound of the rain and the rapid, shallow gasps of the CEO. Isabel blinked, the tears momentarily clearing her vision. The man knelt beside her, his movement economical and practiced. "You're safe," he said, his voice now soft, almost a reassurance to himself. "I've got you." Her limbs were shaking violently, a systemic reaction to the shock, and her lips were parted, utterly incapable of speech. She looked into his tired, honest eyes, and in that moment, the gilded cage of her former life shattered. She didn't know his name, but she knew that the terms of her existence had fundamentally changed. If you believe that a single act of radical kindness can rewrite a destiny, please like and subscribe to Tales of Kindness and Love now, because this is only the silent prelude to a story of profound transformation. The man was Tyler Ford. At 31, his life was a harsh ledger of loss. 2 years prior, cancer had taken his wife. Behind only the ghost of her laughter and the vibrant life force of their daughter, Lily. Tyler's universe had shrunk to the narrow focus of survival, of maintaining the tiny, fragile ecosystem centered around Lily's needs. He fixed washing machines, accepting the minimum payments just to ensure the lights stayed on and the fridge had food in their crumbling third-floor apartment. He smelled perpetually of rusted pipes and cheap detergent, a far cry from the crisp, smoky scent of the uniform he once wore as a firefighter-paramedic. The long, jagged scar on his left arm was a quiet testament to a burning house, a searing heat, and a small life he couldn't save. He never spoke of that failure. Some memories are only carried, heavy and silent, beneath the surface. Now, his world was built on protecting Lily, a 6-year-old kaleidoscope of messy curls and crayon-stained fingers. Tyler carried Isabel through the drizzling night. Her trembling body was cold with shock. She clung to the laptop against her chest, her grip unbreakable even as the agony from her ankle radiated outward. He didn't speak, just adjusted her closer, shielding her from the wind, until they reached the dilapidated building whose walls constantly whispered with the echoes of exhausted lives. He placed her gently on the modest, slightly lumpy sofa in his living room. "You're safe," he repeated, his voice the anchor she desperately needed. Lily walked in moments later, her rain boots squeaking softly. She held a worn plush rabbit in one arm and eyed Isabel with a solemn, serious curiosity that only a child possesses. Then she titled her head, her gaze fixed on the CEO's tear-stained face. "Daddy, why is she crying like I do when I miss Mom?" Tyler froze mid-motion. Isabel's ragged breathing stuttered to a halt. The question was a laser beam, cutting through the shock and the social pretenses that defined her. It was a recognition, a validation of pure, unadulterated pain. No one in her world had ever seen her grief. They had only seen her strategy, her resilience, her unyielding success. To be seen, truly seen, not as a symbol of power, but as a person who hurt. It broke her guard completely. "She's had a rough day, sweetie," Tyler managed, his voice soft, recognizing the profound truth in Lily's observation. "Sometimes, big people cry too." Lily nodded solemnly, her small boots squeaking as she walked away toward her room. Tyler brought a clean towel, wrapping it gently around Isabel's shoulders. "I'll get you something warm. Tea, okay?" She could only nod silently. He returned, holding a steaming mug. The sharp, comforting aroma of ginger filled the small space. "Drink this," he instructed. "Old habit," he replied, sitting down with a roll of bandages. "Ginger tea, clean water, steady hands. Sometimes that's all that's needed." Without further discussion, he gently lifted her foot into his lap. His touch was firm yet careful. He removed the ruinous bandage, cleansed the wound, and began the meticulous process of rewrapping it. Isabel watched him work. She had been surrounded by world-class doctors and assistants, yet none had offered this kind of unconditional care. "You've done this before," she murmured again. "Rescue work," he nodded once. "Fires, accidents. You learn to keep your focus even when you're falling apart inside." Then he took her torn jacket and began threading a needle. "You don't have to," she began, the words thick in her throat. He interrupted gently, his gaze fixed on the frayed fabric. "I know," he said, "but it's worth fixing." The tears that followed were sudden, hot, and shaming. She covered her face, horrified by her lack of control. He stopped sewing instantly. "Did I hurt you?" She shook her head fiercely, her voice breaking into a sob. "No, I'm not used to this, to being cared for without an agenda." He simply handed her a fresh tissue and said, "Everyone deserves it, even you." Lily appeared again, her pajamas covered in stars, holding a piece of paper tight against her chest. She proudly placed it in Isabel's lap. Isabel unfolded the paper. It was a crayoned masterpiece, a tall man, a small girl, and an empty outline of a woman with blonde hair. Confused, Isabel looked up. "Who is this?" Lily smiled, pointing to the empty figure. "That's you. I left the space empty for a long time, waiting for someone who belonged. I think it's supposed to be you now." Isabel's breath hitched. Her entire life had been defined by a constant, exhausting struggle to prove her worth. No one had ever offered her a space. They had only demanded she fill one they designated. Yet here, in this small apartment, she was being offered acceptance for nothing more than simply being broken. She looked at Tyler, who stood silently in the doorway, his eyes conveying patience and quiet hope. She fought for words, finally managing. "Thank you, sweetie. It's the kindest gift I've ever received." Lily giggled, retrieved her crayon box and declared, "Then I'll make it official." "Purple dress, right?" Isabel managed a soft, wet laugh. "Yes, make it purple." As Lily filled the empty outline with bold, uneven strokes of color, Isabel felt something soften and awaken inside her. For the first time in years, she felt what it meant to belong. The ankle began its slow, grueling journey back to health. Each morning brought a fraction more strength, a fraction less pain. Walking remained a struggle, and Isabel detested the feeling of weakness. But Tyler never patronized her. He simply offered his arm without a word, letting her lean on him as they navigated the apartment's tight spaces. "Just one step at a time," he would say softly. It became a quiet rhythm of trust that neither of them named aloud. One sunny Saturday morning, Lily announced it was time for pancakes. "Daddy makes them good," she declared, "but I bet Isabel makes them fancy." "Don't bet on it," Isabel warned. "I've never cooked anything myself, not even toast." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "That's about to change." They gathered in the tiny kitchen, elbows bumping as they mixed the batter in a cracked ceramic bowl. The resulting pancakes were uneven, slightly charred, some gooey in the middle, but they all laughed, real, unrestrained, gut-deep laughter that filled the kitchen with warmth. Lily beamed. "These are weird pancakes," she declared, "but weird is good." Later that night, Isabel rested her head on Tyler's shoulder on the sofa. "You don't know," she whispered, "but you have saved me from so many things." He listened. He didn't turn or ask what she meant. He simply said, "I didn't save anyone. I just saw someone who needed help." That reply, quiet, honest, and completely unheroic, stripped away the years of noise she had lived with. She realized what love could truly be. Not grand gestures, but the willingness to remain still with someone until they could stand again. Then came the sounds of the outside world breaking through, a phone ringing, a low, familiar humming outside the front door, followed by a loud knock. It was David. Isabel froze. Tyler glanced out the window, then quickly pulled the curtain shut. "Don't move," he said, his voice calm, instantly shifting into the focused mode of old. She didn't need to ask why. The elegant black car, parked discreetly down the street, told her everything. They had been found. Over the next few hours, the sidewalk became a quiet, low-profile siege of media and legal emissaries. Later that night, as the reporters tired, Isabel received a message from the board, a generous offer, millions in compensation, full reinstatement, reputation rebranding, everything. All she had to do was sign the papers and smile. She stared at the message, the numbers meaningless. She closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen where Tyler was drying a plate. "I'm not going back," she said. He turned to her, serious. "How do you feel here?" She hesitated, then whispered the answer that carried the weight of her entire life's journey. "Real, safe, accepted." He nodded once. That was all the confirmation he needed. The next morning they packed a small bag. Tyler bundled Lily into his aging van and drove them out of the city, along winding back roads to a quiet farmhouse belonging to his mother. Under a sky thick with stars and silence, Isabel confessed, "I thought I had everything, power, titles, and yet it was all empty." Tyler took a slow sip of tea, then spoke. "They only saw your name, not you." She nodded. "Exactly." He shared his own burden, the fire where he had failed to save a little girl. "You still carry it, don't you?" she asked, reaching for his hand. He nodded. "Every day." The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was shared, honored. They simply sat, their fingers linked beneath the night sky. Two people who had lost something fundamental and were now, silently, beginning to find something else. They didn't speak of love or promises, but when Tyler looked at her and she met his eyes without flinching, they both understood. They had been waiting for each other. The boardroom was colder than she remembered. Isabel walked in, a slight limp in her step, wearing no designer gown, only determination. David Langston stood at the head of the table. "Ms. Monroe," he smirked, "I assumed you would have finally accepted your place outside the board." Isabel walked directly to the center of the room. "I came back to finish this the right way." She raised her hand, asserting a quiet authority. "I may not walk the same way I used to," she said, glancing briefly at her ankle, "but I stand taller now because I hold myself up." The screens flared to life with evidence of David's fraudulent transactions. He tried to seize back control, but she cut him off. "You thought I disappeared because I was weak," she stated, "but I left because I needed room to remember who I was." David stood up abruptly. This is reckless. Do you have any idea what this could cost you?" She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw how truly small he was. "I know," she said, "and I am ready to pay it." She placed her formal resignation on the table. "You can keep your board seats, your stock options, your empire built on fear and silence," she added, "but I will not be a part of it any longer." David tried one last time. "You will regret this. You are throwing everything away." Isabel gave him one final, cool look. "No," she said. "I am walking away from something that never belonged to me in the first place." She gathered her laptop and folder. As she walked out, no one dared to stop her. She did not cry or tremble. She exhaled. Outside, she stepped onto the sidewalk, not as a CEO, but as a woman who had finally chosen herself. When Isabel returned to the apartment, she found Tyler and Lily crouching on the tiny balcony, planting a marigold. "Do you have room for one more in this garden?" she asked, her voice tender. Tyler smiled with the calm certainty of someone who had been waiting. "Always." He nodded. Lily ran over to Isabel. "We're planting new flowers today." Isabel knelt and plunged her hands into the earth with them. She poured her energy into the Lily House, a non-profit organization for women who had been discarded by power structures. Lily insisted on the name because, she explained, flowers grow better when they have sun and love. One evening, Tyler brought her a small, multicolored woven bracelet Lily had made. She called it an engagement bracelet. He smiled. She said she once dared if maybe you wanted to be an unofficial mom first. Isabel put the bracelet on her wrist. "For the first time in my life," she whispered, "I feel like I've been chosen just for being me." Tyler took her hand. They didn't need grand declarations. Everything that mattered was already planted. In the garden, in Lily's laughter, in the small threads of a bracelet woven with hope. Isabel found a completeness no corporate title had ever given her. She was seen. She was loved. And this time, it wasn't because she had power. It was because she had chosen to stay and been chosen in return. Family isn't something you are born into. It is something you build, one act of kindness at a time. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to Tales of Kindness and Love to hear more stories that remind us that kindness is the richest love story of all.